Zara's silver eyes sparkled with amusement as she watched her human husband, Marcus, struggle with the Vorthak transportation pod's controls. His large, clumsy fingers fumbled over the delicate crystal interfaces that responded to the subtle bioelectric fields of her people. She had offered to pilot their vessel countless times during their journey to the Outer Rim colonies, but Marcus insisted on learning everything himself. "The gravitational compensators are inverting again," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the pod's perfect climate control. "How do you make this thing respond properly?" Zara glided over to him with the fluid grace characteristic of the Vorthak species. Her pale blue skin seemed to shimmer in the pod's soft lighting, and the delicate gill slits along her neck fluttered with her gentle laughter. "You're thinking too hard, beloved. The controls respond to emotion and intent, not force." She placed her webbed hand over his, and instantly the pod systems harmonized. The crystal panels glowed with a warm, steady light, and their vessel resumed its smooth trajectory toward the mining station, where they would begin their new life together. Marcus turned to look at his wife, still amazed after 2 years of marriage that someone so ethereal and graceful had chosen him. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful beings, their entire civilization built around harmony, art, and scientific advancement. They had never engaged in warfare, instead resolving conflicts through meditation and consensus. Their technology was based on biological symbiosis, rather than crude mechanical force. Humans, by contrast, were barely tolerated in most galactic communities. They were seen as primitive, violent, and unpredictable. Most species considered them little better than animals that had somehow stumbled into space travel. The fact that a Vorthak of Zara's standing had married a human was still scandalous in many circles. "I don't understand how your people ever developed space travel," Marcus said, settling back into his seat. "Everything you build is so delicate, so refined. It's like watching poetry become real." Zara's expression grew thoughtful. "We learned long ago that the universe responds better to cooperation than domination. Our ships grow rather than being built. Our cities live and breathe. We became partners with nature instead of its conquerors." Marcus nodded, though he still found the concept foreign. Growing up on Earth's frontier colonies, he had learned that survival meant being harder than your environment. Tools were meant to be used until they broke, then repaired or replaced. The idea of technology that was alive, that needed to be nurtured and understood rather than commanded, still felt strange to him. Their destination came into view through the pod's transparent walls. Kepler Station was a massive mining operation built into an asteroid field rich with rare minerals. It housed nearly 50,000 beings from dozens of species, all working together to extract resources that powered the galaxy's expanding civilization. "It's beautiful," Zara whispered, watching the lights of the station twinkle against the cosmic backdrop. So many different peoples working in harmony. Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. He had not told Zara the real reason they were moving to such a remote location. The truth was that finding work in the core worlds had become impossible for him. His human heritage made him unemployable in most sectors, despite his advanced degrees in xenobiology and engineering. Only the frontier stations were desperate enough to hire humans, and even then, he would be watched constantly for signs of the violence his species was known for. "The mining supervisor said there are excellent research facilities here," he said instead. "You'll be able to continue your work on interspecies botanical symbiosis." Zara's research involved creating new forms of plant life that could thrive in the harsh environments of space stations and frontier worlds. Her work had already revolutionized food production on several colonies, but she had given up a prestigious position at the Vorthak Science Institute to marry Marcus. She never complained about the sacrifice, but Marcus knew what it had cost her. As they approached the station's docking bay, Marcus took manual control of the pod systems. This was one area where his human reflexes actually gave him an advantage. Docking required precise timing and spatial awareness, skills that humans had developed through millions of years of hunting and warfare. The docking procedure went smoothly, and soon they were walking through Kepler Station's main concourse. The artificial gravity felt heavy after days in the pod's gentle field, and Marcus noticed how Zara moved more carefully in the higher gravity environment. The station bustled with activity. Tall insectoid Threx workers carried massive loads of processed ore with their 4 powerful arms. Gaseous Nabari floated through special atmospheric tubes, their consciousness flickering through rainbow patterns of light. A group of crystalline shard beings communicated through harmonic vibrations that made the floor hum beneath their feet. Marcus felt the familiar weight of stares as they passed through the crowd. Some beings looked at him with curiosity, others with barely concealed disgust. A few actually moved away as they approached. Zara seemed oblivious to the reactions, her attention focused on the fascinating diversity around them. "Look," she said, pointing to a small garden area where several species were tending plants together. "They're using collaborative growing techniques. The Threx are providing mineral nutrition while the Aquari are managing water distribution. It's exactly what my research predicted would work." Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm, but he noticed the Threx workers glancing nervously in his direction. Even here on the edge of civilized space, his reputation preceded him. They found their assigned quarters in the station's residential section. The rooms were larger than Marcus had expected, with high ceilings and walls that could be programmed to display any environment. Zara immediately began adjusting the atmospheric settings to something closer to her homeworld's humid, oxygen-rich environment. "It's perfect," she said, though Marcus could see her trying to hide her disappointment. The accommodations were comfortable but sterile, nothing like the living architecture of Vorthak cities where buildings were actually massive. Engineered organisms. Marcus began unpacking their belongings, carefully removing the few possessions they had brought from their previous home. Most were Zara's scientific instruments and botanical samples. His own possessions fit into a single small case. At the bottom of his case, wrapped in soft cloth, lay the one item he had never shown Zara: his grandfather's cavalry saber, passed down through 5 generations of his family. The weapon was over 300 years old, its steel blade still sharp despite its age. Marcus had brought it partly for sentimental reasons, but mainly because deep in his human instincts, he knew that the frontier was still a dangerous place. He rewrapped the sword quickly and hid it in the back of their closet. Zara must never know he had brought a weapon to their new home. 3 months had passed since their arrival at Kepler Station, and Marcus had begun to settle into the rhythm of frontier life. His work in the mining operations environmental systems kept him busy, and he had earned grudging respect from his colleagues for his ability to solve problems that stumped others. Humans, it turned out, had a talent for thinking outside conventional parameters when systems failed. Zara had thrown herself into her research with renewed vigor. The station's unique environment, with its mixture of artificial and natural ecosystems, provided endless opportunities for her botanical experiments. She had already developed 3 new varieties of food plants that could thrive in the station's recycled atmosphere, earning praise from the station commander and improving nutrition for thousands of residents. Their personal life had found a comfortable balance as well. Zara had made friends among the research staff, particularly Dr. Theiss, an elderly Vorthak scientist who had become something of a mentor to her. Marcus remained more isolated, but he was used to that. Humans were still viewed with suspicion, but at least here his competence was valued enough to overlook his species' reputation. The only source of tension came from Zara's growing friendship with Commander Valix, the station's security chief. Valix was a Kalahari, a proud warrior species known for their honor code and military prowess. Unlike humans, who were seen as chaotic and unpredictable in their violence, the Kalahari were respected for their disciplined approach to conflict. Valix stood nearly 8 feet tall, his blue-scaled hide covered in ritual scarification that told the story of his military achievements. His people served as peacekeepers and military advisors throughout the galaxy, their reputation for integrity and strength making them natural leaders in mixed populations, like Kepler Station. Marcus first became aware of the problem during a dinner gathering in the station's main social hall. Zara had been invited to present her latest research findings, and Marcus had come to support her. The presentation went well, with representatives from several species expressing interest in implementing her techniques on their homeworlds. During the social hour that followed, Marcus noticed Valix approaching their table. The Kalahari moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, his presence commanding respect from everyone in the room. "Dr. Zara," Valix said, his voice a deep rumble that carried undertones of genuine warmth. "Your work continues to amaze me. The food gardens you've established have improved life for everyone on this station." Zara's gill slits fluttered with pleasure at the compliment. "Thank you, Commander. I couldn't have succeeded without the support your security teams provided. Having Kalahari guards protecting the experimental plots made all the difference. Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach as he watched the interaction. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about it, but he could sense the underlying currents. Valix clearly admired Zara, not just professionally but personally, and Marcus could see that Zara was flattered by the attention of someone so respected. Perhaps, Valix continued, you would allow me to escort you to the Galactic Botanical Conference next month. I am traveling to the core worlds on official business, and I could ensure your safe passage. The offer was generous and practical. Travel between frontier stations and the core worlds could be dangerous, and having a Kalahari escort would guarantee safety and respect. But Marcus felt his jaw clench at the suggestion. That's very kind of you, Zara replied, but Marcus and I haven't discussed travel plans yet. Valix's golden eyes shifted to Marcus for the first time in the conversation. The look was not hostile, but it was measuring. Of course, though I should mention that the conference has restricted access. Only certain species are permitted to attend the primary sessions. The implication was clear. Humans would not be welcome at such a gathering. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he forced himself to remain calm. Zara can make her own decisions about travel, Marcus said quietly. Naturally, Valix agreed. I simply wanted to ensure she had options available. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but Marcus could feel the undercurrent of tension. He noticed how other beings in the room seemed to assume that Valix and Zara made a more natural pair than Marcus and his wife. The Kalahari was everything that Marcus was not. Respected, honored, welcomed in any society. Over the following weeks, Marcus tried to push his concerns aside. He focused on his work and supported Zara's research as best he could. But he couldn't help noticing how often Valix found reasons to visit their section of the station, or how Zara's eyes lit up when she spoke about the commander's latest stories from his military campaigns. The situation came to a head during a crisis in the mining operation. An equipment malfunction had flooded one of the main extraction chambers with toxic gas, trapping a crew of Threx workers. Marcus was part of the emergency response team, working to develop a solution for neutralizing the contamination. While Marcus and the engineering staff worked frantically on the technical problem, Valix led a rescue mission into the affected area. The commander's quick thinking and courage saved 6 lives, and the entire station celebrated his heroism. That evening, Zara spoke of little else. Did you see how brave he was? She asked Marcus as they prepared for sleep. He went into that chamber knowing he might not come out. The Threx workers say he risked his life for them without hesitation. He was doing his job, Marcus replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of his voice. It was more than that, Zara insisted. He could have sent subordinates. Instead, he led from the front. That's the kind of honor and courage that my people deeply respect. Marcus turned away from her, pretending to organize his work clothes for the next day. I'm sure the Threx are grateful. Marcus, Zara's voice carried a note of concern. Are you feeling well? You've been distant lately. He wanted to tell her about his fears, about how he saw the way others looked at them and made comparisons. He wanted to explain that he knew he could never be the hero that someone like Valix was. But how could he burden her with his insecurities? I'm fine, he said instead. Just tired from the long hours we've been working. Zara accepted the explanation, but Marcus could see the worry in her silver eyes. He knew he was failing her in ways he couldn't even articulate. She deserved someone who could stand beside her in any company, someone who would elevate her status rather than diminish it. Late that night, while Zara slept peacefully beside him, Marcus made his way to their closet and carefully unwrapped his grandfather's sword. He held the ancient weapon in his hands, feeling the weight of its steel and the history it carried. His grandfather had been a soldier, and his great-grandfather before him. They had fought in humanity's expansion wars, earning their place in the galaxy through blood and determination. But those days were gone. Now humans were expected to be grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance they could find. Marcus rewrapped the sword and returned it to its hiding place. Whatever problems he was facing, violence was not the answer. He would have to find another way to prove his worth. The attack came without warning on a Tuesday morning, during the station's artificial dawn cycle. Marcus was in the Environmental Control Center, monitoring the atmospheric processors when the first explosion shook Kepler Station. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the complex, and the lights shifted to the red emergency spectrum. Marcus's training kicked in immediately. He sealed the environmental systems and activated the emergency protocols that would maintain life support, even if the main power grid failed. Through the control room's reinforced windows, he could see chaos erupting in the station's corridors as beings ran for shelter. His communicator crackled to life with Commander Valex's voice. "All personnel, this is Security Command. We are under attack by Raider forces. Repeat, we are under attack. All civilians are to proceed immediately to designated safe zones. All security personnel report to defensive positions." Marcus felt his blood run cold. The Raiders were a loose confederation of outlaw species that preyed on frontier settlements and shipping lanes. They were known for their brutality and their practice of taking valuable prisoners for slave labor. An isolated station like Kepler would be an irresistible target. He tried to reach Zara on his personal communicator, but the signal was jammed. She had been in the botanical laboratories when the attack started, which were located in Section 7 of the station. Marcus accessed the security monitors from his console and watched in horror as Raider troops, heavily armed and wearing powered battle armor, fought their way through the station's corridors. The defenders were putting up fierce resistance, but they were clearly outgunned. The Raiders had brought military-grade weapons and equipment, while the station's security force was designed more for peacekeeping than warfare. Even Valex's Kalahari guards, for all their training and courage, were struggling against the superior firepower. Marcus watched the tactical display with growing desperation. The Raiders were systematically taking control of each section of the station, herding civilians into cargo holds while eliminating any organized resistance. Section 7, where Zara was working, had already fallen. He tried again to contact Security Command, but the communications array had been damaged in the initial assault. Marcus was alone in the environmental center, with no way to reach his wife or coordinate with the defenders. But he wasn't helpless. Moving quickly to a secondary console, Marcus began accessing the station's infrastructure systems. Kepler Station was a complex organism of interconnected technologies, and his months of working on environmental controls had given him knowledge of systems that even the Raiders wouldn't expect to be weaponized. He started with the atmospheric processors. By adjusting the gas mixtures in specific sections, he could create zones where the Raiders' equipment would malfunction. Their powered armor relied on external air filtration, and a sudden shift to low oxygen, high nitrogen atmosphere would force them to rely on internal reserves. Next, he tackled the gravitational systems. The station used artificial gravity generators throughout its structure, and Marcus had learned to maintain and calibrate them. By creating sudden gravitational shifts in key corridors, he could disrupt Raider formations and give the defenders tactical advantages. The work was dangerous. If he made a mistake, he could accidentally harm the station's defenders or civilians. But as he watched the tactical display show more sections falling to the Raiders, Marcus knew he had to take the risk. His sabotage began to have an effect within minutes. Reports started coming through the emergency channels of Raider troops suddenly finding themselves in zero gravity or struggling to breathe in altered atmospheric conditions. The advance slowed, and in some areas the defenders were able to push back. But Marcus's primary concern remained finding Zara. Using his access to the station's internal sensors, he began tracking life signs in Section 7. The readings were confusing, with multiple beings moving through the area, but he thought he detected Vorthak bioelectric signatures among the prisoners. A new explosion rocked the station, this one much closer to the environmental center. Through the windows, Marcus could see Raider troops advancing down the main corridor toward his position. They had identified him as the source of the sabotage. Marcus felt a moment of pure terror as he realized his situation. He was trapped in the environmental center with no way out and no means of defense. The Raiders would reach him in minutes, and then they would have control of the station's life support systems. His hand moved automatically to his personal storage locker, where he kept basic tools and equipment. Hidden behind his emergency rations was a small case he had placed there weeks ago, but never thought he would need to open. Inside was a military-grade sidearm, a human weapon designed for close combat. Marcus had purchased it during their journey to Kepler Station, telling himself it was just a precaution. Like the sword hidden in his quarters, it represented a part of his heritage that he preferred to keep secret from Zara. The weapon felt strange in his hands. It had been years since his mandatory military service on Earth's colonies, but the training came back quickly. He checked the charge level and adjusted the setting for maximum effectiveness against armored targets. The first raider through the environmental center's door never knew what hit him. Marcus's shot took the armored figure center mass, the energy blast overloading the power armor's systems and dropping the attacker instantly. The second raider managed to return fire, but Marcus had already moved to a new position behind the main processing unit. What followed was a running battle through the environmental center's maze of equipment and machinery. Marcus used his knowledge of the facility's layout to outmaneuver his attackers, while his human reflexes and combat training gave him advantages that the raiders hadn't expected. The fight lasted only minutes, but when it was over, 6 raider troops lay unconscious or dead among the environmental processors. Marcus stood over them, breathing hard, the smoking weapon still in his hands. He felt a mixture of satisfaction and revulsion at what he had done. The violence was necessary, but it reminded him uncomfortably of why his species was feared throughout the galaxy. Humans had a capacity for sudden, overwhelming aggression that other species found disturbing, but there was no time for reflection. The station was still under attack and Zara was still missing. Marcus gathered additional weapons from the fallen raiders and prepared to venture into the station's corridors. He would find his wife, whatever the cost. As he prepared to leave the environmental center, Marcus caught a glimpse of himself in a reflective surface. The being staring back at him looked nothing like the mild-mannered engineer that Zara had married. This was something older and more dangerous, a reminder of humanity's violent past. For the first time since their marriage, Marcus stopped trying to hide what he was. The corridors of Kepler Station had become a war zone. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with the sound of distant explosions and weapons fire. Marcus moved through the chaos with a purpose that surprised even him. The raider weapons he had captured feeling natural in his hands despite years of disuse. His route to Section 7 took him through the station's main commercial district, where he found evidence of fierce fighting. Kalahari security forces had made a stand here, their disciplined formations holding key choke points while civilians evacuated. But the cost had been high. Bodies lay scattered across the polished floors, both defenders and attackers mixed together in death. Marcus paused at one intersection where a wounded Kalahari trooper was attempting to treat his own injuries. The warrior's blue scales were darkened with blood and one of his arms hung useless at his side. Despite his condition, he still gripped his weapon and watched the approaches for enemy movement. "Human," the trooper gasped when he noticed Marcus. "You should not be here. The safe zones are in Section 3. "I'm looking for my wife," Marcus replied, kneeling beside the wounded warrior. She was in the botanical labs when the attack started. The Kalahari's golden eyes focused on the weapons Marcus carried. "You fight well for a civilian. Those are raider weapons." Marcus felt a flicker of the old shame but pushed it aside. "I do what I have to do." "As do we all," the trooper agreed. He gestured toward the corridor leading to Section 7. "The raiders have established a stronghold in that area. They are gathering prisoners for transport to their ships. If your mate lives, she is likely there." "What about Commander Valix?" Marcus asked. "Is he coordinating the defense?" The Kalahari's expression grew grim. "The commander led an assault on the main raider force 2 hours ago. His squad was overrun. We have had no contact since." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions at the news. Valix had been a rival for Zara's affections, but he was also a good man who had died trying to protect the station. The thought that the respected Kalahari commander had fallen while Marcus survived felt wrong somehow. "I need to reach Section 7, Marcus said. The wounded trooper studied him for a long moment. "You will not survive a direct assault. The raiders have heavy weapons positioned at every approach." He paused, then seemed to reach a decision. "There is another way. The maintenance tunnels that run beneath the station levels. They are not well guarded because most species cannot navigate them effectively. Most species, they require climbing and crawling through narrow spaces. Your human build might serve you well there." The trooper activated a wrist display and transmitted a map to Marcus's communicator. "This shows the tunnel network. It will bring you up inside Section 7, near the botanical labs." Marcus studied the map, noting the complexity of the route. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I have seen you fight," the Kalahari replied. "And because I know what it means to love someone worth dying for." Marcus thanked the warrior and began making his way to the nearest maintenance access. The tunnels were exactly as described: narrow, poorly lit, and designed for automated repair systems rather than living beings. But his human physiology, evolved for climbing and crawling, allowed him to navigate the passages that would have been impossible for larger species like the Kalahari or the insectoid Threx. As he crawled through the cramped spaces, Marcus found himself thinking about his relationship with Zara. He had spent 2 years trying to be someone he wasn't, attempting to fit into her peaceful worldview while suppressing the more aggressive aspects of his nature. But now, faced with genuine danger, those suppressed instincts were proving to be exactly what was needed. The maintenance tunnels carried sound from the station levels above, and Marcus could hear the continuing battle as he moved toward his target. The raiders were methodical in their conquest, but they were also meeting unexpected resistance. The various species that called Kepler Station home might not be warriors by nature, but they were fighting fiercely to defend their community. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Marcus reached the access point that would bring him into Section 7. The tunnel ended at a maintenance panel that opened into a storage room adjacent to the botanical laboratories. Marcus could hear voices speaking in the harsh, guttural language of the raiders. He carefully opened the access panel and peered into the storage room. It was empty, but he could see shadows moving in the corridor beyond. Marcus squeezed through the opening and took stock of his situation. He had 3 energy weapons taken from the fallen raiders, plus various tools from his engineering kit that could be improvised as weapons. Moving to the storage room's door, Marcus listened to the sounds from the corridor. The raider voices were closer now, and he could make out enough of their discussion to understand that they were preparing to move prisoners to their transport ships. The evacuation was beginning, which meant time was running out. Marcus opened the door slightly and saw them. A group of perhaps 20 beings, including several Vorthak, were being herded down the corridor by 4 heavily armed raiders. The prisoners' hands were bound with energy restraints, and they moved with the exhausted shuffle of people who had been through a traumatic ordeal. Among them, Marcus spotted Zara. Her usually pristine appearance was disheveled, and there was a bruise on one side of her face, but she appeared to be unharmed. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by a cold rage at seeing his wife treated like cargo. The tactical situation was challenging. 4 armed raiders with superior equipment and armor, 20 hostages who could be caught in crossfire, and a corridor that offered little cover. A frontal assault would likely result in civilian casualties, which was unacceptable. Marcus closed his eyes and forced himself to think tactically rather than emotionally. His engineering background had taught him to look at problems from multiple angles, and his human heritage provided him with an understanding of violence that might give him an advantage. The raiders were confident and careless, which was their weakness. They saw the station's population as sheep to be herded rather than potential threats. They would not expect a coordinated attack from what appeared to be a single, isolated survivor. Marcus began to formulate a plan that would use the station's own systems as weapons. The environmental controls he had used earlier were just the beginning. Kepler Station was filled with industrial equipment that could be turned to violent purposes if one knew how to trigger the right failures. The maintenance room where he had emerged contained controls for the section's lighting and atmospheric systems. Marcus quickly accessed the local network and began entering commands that would create the chaos he needed for his rescue attempt. In 60 seconds, Section 7 would become a very dangerous place to be a raider. Marcus checked his weapons one final time and prepared to remind everyone present why humans had once been the most feared species in the galaxy. Marcus's plan unfolded with the precision of a symphony of destruction. First, the lights went out throughout Section 7, plunging the corridors into absolute darkness. The raiders' armor had night vision capabilities, but the sudden transition would momentarily disorient them. In that same instant, Marcus triggered a cascading failure in the artificial gravity generators, creating pockets of zero gravity that would disrupt their formations. He moved in the darkness with the confidence of someone who had studied every technical specification of Kepler Station. While the raiders struggled to adapt to the changing conditions, Marcus used his knowledge of the facility's layout to position himself for maximum tactical advantage. The first raider died without knowing what hit him. Marcus's energy blast caught the armored figure in the back. The shot precisely placed to overload the power armor's fusion cell. The resulting explosion lit up the corridor for a brief moment, revealing the chaos that Marcus had created. The other raiders were trying to maintain formation around their prisoners, but the shifting gravity made movement treacherous. Marcus used this confusion to his advantage, moving through the zero-gravity zones with the skill that came from years of working in space environments. Contact. "We have an active shooter in Section 7, one of the raiders shouted into his communicator. "Requesting immediate backup." Marcus smiled grimly in the darkness. The raiders were used to easy targets, frontier settlements with minimal defenses. They were not prepared for the kind of asymmetric warfare that humans had perfected over centuries of conflict. The second raider went down when Marcus triggered a controlled explosion in the corridor's atmospheric recycling system. The blast itself wasn't lethal, but it sent debris flying through the zero-gravity environment at high velocity. The raider's armor protected him from the impact, but the force sent him tumbling helplessly through the weightless space. By now, the remaining two raiders had identified Marcus's approximate position and were laying down suppressing fire. Their energy weapons lit up the corridor with each blast, creating brief moments of visibility that Marcus used to track their movements. "The prisoners," Zara's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't let them hurt the prisoners." Marcus felt his heart clench at hearing his wife's voice, but he forced himself to maintain tactical focus. The raiders were using the hostages as human shields, counting on his reluctance to endanger innocent lives. It was a sound strategy against most species, but they didn't understand human psychology. Humans were uniquely capable of making the cold calculations necessary for this kind of warfare. Marcus could simultaneously love his wife desperately while also accepting that her death might be the price of stopping the raiders from escaping with 20 other prisoners. But he had no intention of letting it come to that. Marcus triggered his next gambit, a sudden restoration of normal gravity throughout the corridor. The raiders who had been floating helplessly in zero-G suddenly crashed to the deck, their heavy armor working against them as they struggled to regain their footing. In that moment of confusion, Marcus made his move. He abandoned stealth in favor of speed, charging through the darkness with weapons blazing. His first shot took out the raider who had been using Zara as a shield. The energy blast perfectly placed to drop the armored figure without harming the prisoners behind him. The final raider managed to get his weapon up and return fire, but Marcus was already moving. The energy blast passed harmlessly through the space where he had been a split second before. Marcus's return shot was not so forgiving. When the emergency lighting finally flickered back on, the corridor was silent except for the sound of frightened breathing from the rescued prisoners. 4 raiders lay motionless in their powered armor, and Marcus stood over them with smoking weapons in his hands. But it was the expression on his wife's face that stopped Marcus cold. Zara was staring at him with a mixture of shock, fear, and something that might have been awe. The other prisoners were looking at him with similar expressions as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "Marcus?" Zara's voice was barely a whisper. "What? How did you—" Marcus looked down at the weapons in his hands, suddenly acutely aware of what he must look like to beings who had never witnessed human warfare firsthand. His clothes were torn and stained with battle, his face grim with the aftermath of violence. He looked nothing like the gentle engineer who had married into Vorthak society. "I came to find you," he said simply, setting down the weapons and moving to help her with the energy restraints that bound her hands. As the restraints fell away, Zara reached up to touch the bruise on her face where one of the raiders had struck her during the initial capture. "They said they were going to sell us to the slave markets in the Outer Rim. They said humans would bring a premium price because of your reputation for violence." Marcus felt his jaw clench at the thought of his wife being sold into slavery. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "No," Zara assured him quickly. "They wanted to keep us in good condition for sale. But Marcus, the things they said about humans, about what your species is capable of—" Before Marcus could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Both of them tensed, but it was station security forces who appeared around the corner, led by a wounded but very much alive Commander Valex. The Kalahari commander took in the scene with professional appreciation. 4 dead raiders, 20 rescued prisoners. And a human standing in the middle of it all with the calm demeanor of someone who had just completed routine maintenance work. Impressive, Valak said, his golden eyes meeting Marcus's. I've seen Kalahari Special Forces teams that couldn't have executed this operation so cleanly. Marcus felt a moment of bitter satisfaction. The respected commander who had competed for his wife's admiration was acknowledging his capabilities as a warrior. But the victory felt hollow when he saw the way Zara was still looking at him. The station is secure, Valak continued. The remaining raiders have been eliminated or captured. Your sabotage of their equipment was crucial to our success. He paused, studying Marcus with new interest. I was not aware that human civilians received such extensive combat training. Most don't, Marcus replied. But some of us remember what we used to be. Valak nodded slowly. Perhaps it is time the galaxy remembered as well. As the security teams began escorting the rescued prisoners to medical treatment, Marcus found himself walking beside Zara in uncomfortable silence. She seemed to be studying him as if seeing him for the first time, and Marcus wasn't sure he liked what she was discovering. You had weapons hidden in our quarters, she said finally. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. And you knew how to use them. This wasn't something you learned recently. Again, Marcus could only nod. Zara stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Who are you, Marcus? Who are you really? Marcus led Zara back to their quarters in silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts after the events of the day. The station was beginning the long process of recovery from the raider attack, but for Marcus and Zara, a different kind of reckoning was about to begin. Once inside their home, Marcus went directly to their bedroom closet and retrieved the cloth-wrapped bundle he had hidden there months ago. Zara watched with growing amazement as he carefully unwrapped his grandfather's cavalry saber, the ancient steel blade gleaming despite its age. This has been in my family for 300 years, Marcus said, holding the weapon with reverent care. My great-great-grandfather carried it during the Terran expansion wars. Every generation of my family has been soldiers until me. Zara's silver eyes were wide as she studied the sword. You've had this the entire time we've been married? I brought it when we left for Kepler Station. I told myself it was just for sentimental reasons, but deep down, I knew we were heading to a dangerous place. Marcus set the sword carefully on their bed. I didn't want you to know because I was afraid of what you would think. What I would think about what? Marcus met her gaze directly for the first time since the rescue. About what humans really are, Zara. About what I really am. He moved to their main living area and activated the wall display, calling up historical files from the Galactic database. Images began appearing on the screen. Human soldiers in combat, human ships in battle formations, scenes from the expansion wars that had brought humanity to the stars. This is what we were before we learned to be ashamed of ourselves, Marcus said. For 1,000 years, humans were the most feared military force in the galaxy. We didn't build peaceful civilizations like the Vorthak or honor-bound societies like the Kalahari. We built war machines. The images continued to cycle through history. Human marines storming alien strongholds, human pilots in desperate space battles, human generals planning campaigns across multiple star systems. The Terran expansion wasn't a peaceful colonization effort, Marcus continued. It was a conquest. We took what we wanted and held it through superior tactics and sheer ruthlessness. Other species learned to fear the sound of human battle cries. Zara sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the revelations. But the humans I know are gentle people. Engineers, scientists, artists. They're nothing like this. Because we learned to hide what we are, Marcus said bitterly. After the expansion ended, humanity realized that our reputation was making us outcasts. So we consciously chose to suppress our military traditions. We taught our children to be ashamed of our warrior heritage. We convinced ourselves that peaceful cooperation was better than honest strength. He gestured at the images still cycling on the display. But it's still there, Zara. In our genes, in our reflexes, in our ability to make the hard choices that other species can't. Today proved that. Zara was quiet for a long time, processing what she had learned. Finally, she looked up at him with an expression he couldn't read. Is that why you married me? To prove that humans could be accepted by peaceful species. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. No, Zara, I married you because I love you. Everything else was just... I was trying to be worthy of that love. By pretending to be someone you're not? By trying to become someone better than what I was born to be? Zara stood up and moved to the display, studying the images of human military history. These soldiers in the pictures, were they monsters? Marcus was surprised by the question. No. They were men and women doing what they thought was necessary to protect their families and build a future for their children. Most of them were probably good people. Then why are you so ashamed of being related to them? Because the galaxy told us we should be. Because being a warrior in a universe that values peace makes you an outcast. Zara turned away from the display to face him. Marcus, today you saved my life and the lives of 19 other beings. You used skills and instincts that you inherited from these soldiers to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. How is that something to be ashamed of? Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of a knot he had carried for years. The other species will never accept us if they know what we really are. Some won't, Zara agreed. But others will. Commander Valix certainly seemed to respect what you accomplished today. Valix is Kalhari. His people understand warriors, and I'm Vorthak, Zara said softly. We understand that sometimes peace must be defended by those willing to fight for it. She moved closer to him, reaching up to touch the side of his face where a cut from the battle was still healing. The man I married was gentle and kind and brilliant. Today I learned that he was also brave and deadly and capable of protecting what he loves. Why would that make me love him less? Marcus felt tears he hadn't realized were building begin to fall. Because I lied to you about who I was. No, Zara said firmly. You showed me one side of who you are. Today I saw another side. You're both the gentle engineer who helps me with my research and the warrior who fought through 4 raiders to rescue me. You don't have to choose between them. She picked up the ancient sword from their bed, testing its weight carefully. This is beautiful. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. It's a weapon, Marcus said. It's also art. It's history. It's a symbol of people who fought for something they believed in. Zara handed the sword back to him. I think it should be displayed in our home, not hidden in a closet. Marcus stared at the blade, seeing it with new eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't feel shame when he looked at the symbol of his heritage. There's something else you should know, he said. The reason we had to come to Kepler Station wasn't just for the research opportunities. I couldn't find work in the core worlds because of what I am. Human engineers are considered security risks. I know, Zara said quietly. Marcus looked at her in surprise. You knew? I'm not naive, Marcus. I understood what it meant for my career when I chose to marry a human. I made that choice because I believed you were worth it. She smiled, and for the first time since the attack it reached her eyes. Today proved I was right. That evening, as the station continued its recovery efforts, Marcus and Zara sat together in their quarters. The ancient sword hung on their wall where everyone could see it. No longer a source of shame, but a reminder of strength when strength was needed. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we rebuild, Zara replied. The station, our lives, our understanding of each other. She leaned against his shoulder. And maybe we help the galaxy remember that there's nothing wrong with being dangerous when danger threatens the things you love. Marcus nodded, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. He was still the gentle engineer who loved his brilliant wife. But he was also the descendant of soldiers, and for the first time, that felt like something to be proud of rather than ashamed of. In the days that followed, word of the human who had single-handedly rescued 20 prisoners spread throughout the frontier regions. Some species reacted with fear, others with respect. But Marcus no longer cared about hiding what he was. Humanity had spent generations trying to earn acceptance through submission. Perhaps it was time to try earning respect through honest strength instead.